So this is the before and after hair transplant result, and before our client share his experience, he's from all the way from Chicago, and he's kind enough to fly back to share his experience to help the audience and the viewer, what's it like to do surgery, and by watching the before and after video, it will help him before. So now he want to give back and share his experience. So that's him before. I'm not gonna go real quick, so then that way he will have we'll go over how the explanation of the surgery is and all stuff. And that's before. We load the hairline brown both temple, and this is him now. Excellent density. Okay, and then go ahead. So why don't you start from the beginning? How do you found me, and how the hair loss affected you, and research and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I think starting around middle of college, maybe early college, I always had my hair medium length, I would say, and I never really noticed the progression happening as it was kind of a case of body dysmorphia as it looked. I would always be picture averse. I would not want to look at that in the mirror and recognize that it was receding. Every now and then people would be like, oh, you should cut your hair short. You would look better short with hair, with shorter hair. So I would, and then I would have a picture of myself taken at some point, and I would look back and I would just see that, and it didn't feel like me, to say the least. So I guess that's where it all started, with just going down the look. You look into the options, propecia, Rogaine, transplants, etc. So I started going down that path, and I went on propecia for about a year or two, and it helped with the back loss for sure. But the receding hairline still happened in my early 20s, and it just kept on going back. And so finally I kind of made a decision based on just looking at my family history, seeing where the baldness patterns lied. I figured I had my father's hairline, and I did have my father's hairline. So I made the decision at a relatively young age to get a hair transplant. And so far it's working out. I might have to come back for a little bit of a fill in the near future, but I'm happy with the results, and the doctor is too, clearly. So,
So what made you choose my clinic when,
Yep.
and what made you flying from Chicago and get out of your comfort zone,
Yeah, so I could start with Chicago, because I definitely did do my research on professionals in Chicago who provided this service, and I just didn't like the overall office experience. One, who I just won't name, but I went in there and I didn't even get to see the doctor. I was only talking to assistants, and at that point it's like, well, I'm spending a lot of money on this, I'd like to actually talk to the doctor, and meet them as a person too. So that was one option. And then of course, if you're from Chicago, or maybe you just have driven through the city, every time you go down the highways, you see tons of Brian Urlacher jokes about him having lack of hair, and now he has hair. They're on billboard signs everywhere over there. So you just kind of see that over and over again, and eventually you just want to get it done. So I went on the internet and I started doing research for other professionals. Dr. Diep wasn't far away from the research rabbit hole, and I was looking through them, and I guess what caught my attention the most was that he had worked on clients with hair that were relatively as thick and as wavy. I kind of want to say strung too, in the sense that my hair just, once it goes a certain way, it just wants to stay that way for a while. It's not very easily melded. So I like that I saw that, and I also went into looking into why it was working for those hair types. And one of the reasons I found was that he actually used a wider graft hole punch size, right? So that was actually part of the reason. I know some people get turned away from that because of the wide punch size, but I found for my hair size, I have really thick hair, so the wide punch size was something I wanted, because I didn't want it to split the roots of the hair and go away. And in the end, everything heals. So I don't have any issues with the size of the scars any there. You can't even see them. When I get a guard haircut down to a 2 or a 1, only I'm able to notice that it's there, because I knew what my hair looked like before. No one else could notice that.
Yeah, because the thinner hair, then I use a smaller tip.
Yep.
The thicker hair, you gotta use a bigger tip.
Yep.
You have to accommodate for the size of the root.
Yep.
Because if you do such a fine, so thin tip, and to extract that and with really a thicker root, you will split the graft and you destroy most of the graft.
Right.
And ultimately, you pay for result, for density.
Yep.
Yeah. And you know, again, when even you know, 0.9, 1.0, it heals the same, you know, and when the end result is similar, but in terms of the healing and the scarring, but it make a huge difference in terms of the quality of the graft. And that's why I always test patient. I use smaller tip for a thin hair graft. I use a bigger tip for a thick hair graft, like in your case, to give you this kind of density, you know. So that was good. Can you share the experience, or I don't know, you remember any on the surgery day when you get here, and then recovery, and when the hair regrow back, when you start?
Sure. So surgery, I flew out the night before the actual surgery, and I just stayed at a local hotel. I remember I was pretty restless that night. I think I think I ended up waking up at like 4 in the morning, and the surgery I had to be here around 5:30ish, around between 5:30 and 6. And I remember walking to the office. They took my blood rate or heart pressure and all of that, and it was just like really high. And they're like, "Oh, it's normal. You're just nervous and whatnot." And yeah, I completely was nervous. You gave me your concoction to help me relax, and yeah, it worked out. I started talking to you. You were playing classical music. I think some music, or maybe the radio was on, or game or something. I can't remember. But
it's the 80s. It's my
I never fully went under, and I was awake for most of the time. And I think the most uncomfortable part about it for me was the fact that I was lying down for 13 hours. And I always kind of wanted to cross my legs and whatnot. But other than that, it was pleasant. I was just talking with you for a while, easy to get along with for 13 hours. Music was fine. Your assistants did a great job too to help with.
Great.
And then, yeah, shortly after that, head was all bandaged up. I went back to the hotel, maybe like 10 minutes away from here. Made sure I didn't lay down, put my head against anything, and kind of just went through the first night. There were some pictures taken on my own phone, just to like document the process for myself. And then I flew home the next day. So it was fun walking through the airport with the head bandage on, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can stay here for a couple of weeks if you can get away with that. But yeah, once back at home, I was working from home for a while, took a vacation, and just said I was going to work from home for a week. I'm a software engineer, so I'm able to do that. And I was just lying up pretty much every night, sleeping in a recliner. I didn't want to touch the grafts too much. There was the proper soap, or I think the soap shampoo that you gave me.
Medicated shampoo, yeah.
It was medicated shampoo. Yes, I was washing with that very lightly. There was just a bowl of water that I was like lightly pouring over my head. Didn't do anything too crazy with it. And nothing, for me, in my experience, nothing really felt out initially. I think there was maybe a couple that either fell out, or like just the top half of it, outside of it, just like kind of shaved off almost, but the root was still in place. But for the most part, a lot of it just started growing back kind of right away. When I had the surgery, I didn't opt for the full head shave. I had a little bit of length left, maybe like 1.5 to 2 inches back here.
On top, yeah.
So yeah, that started growing out within a month, and yeah, within a month I was able to just kind of cover up that section that was kind of poorly growing underneath, and it just kept on going from there. I think within 4 or 5 months I had 1.5 to 2 inches in the front.
So you wanted the early growth. I mean, it took off growing pretty quickly.
It did.
And that's 5%. As I mentioned to many in my video, 95% would take a year for full growth, but yours take off growing. And you didn't use ACell or the Amnifill, right?
That's right. I did not use ACell or Amnifill.
Most of my patients do for that, but yours, that's excellent.
I wasn't in a place to be able to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, if you can do it, go for it. I think the research now for that is much better than it was when I was originally looking. I will say that I think while the top had really good growth within the first like 5 or 6 months, a little bit on the sides they still grew, but it took a lot longer for them to be a little bit natural. They were very kinky and just all over the place for the first few months, and then a year later now everything's back to normal. So
You know, a lot of people really freak out and nervous
Mhm.
during the 4 months or 5 months or 6 months
Yep.
because when the hair they're still healing, it hasn't grown out full density or it hasn't come out perfect, you know. But then I always tell them, look, it take a year when everything to really come together.
Yep.
And then, you know, and then that's when the size and it will look more natural, you know.
Even with me, even though I saw my hair grow again, I was always worried: is it just gonna fall out? Is it gonna do this? So even if you're gonna get good results, it's just gonna happen. You just gotta get it done, and at that point, just wait, just let time happen, and time will heal it, and everything will be okay.
Yeah. And so did anybody notice you have hair transplant, and did anybody say any comment on those stuff?
Yeah, so when I went back, there was the few people in my life that were taking care of me. Obviously, they knew about it. I went to a friend's graduation, and he noticed it a little bit because the front wasn't fully kind of covered up yet at that point. But after that, I ended up switching jobs, and just a lot of people in my life just I hadn't seen for a while at that point, either a couple months from vacations and whatnot. And my hair grew out again. And so, honestly, a lot of people didn't really notice because I just put my hair back to that medium-sized length of a couple inches. And then now I'm sporting the short hair again, but no one ever said anything because I think they just assumed that I had slightly longer hair at the time. So, yeah, I think I got away with it.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad you kind enough to fly back here to share your experience.
Yeah, I was happy with it.
Yeah, and then it's helpful for the audience to get a glimpse of what's how the process of hair loss affected you, the surgery process, you know, taking out the flying yourself over here, because you know a lot of people, they made a mistake of two things. You know, you if you watch a lot of videos, they say number one, you don't base on price. It's too cheap, sometimes it's too good to be true, right? And number two is location. Somebody just close to you doesn't mean that's the best, right?
Yep.
And so you don't do it because someone's close to you. You don't do it just for the price. You want to make sure you do your thorough research. You know, reading review is helpful, but it's still subjective, right?
Yep.
And you want to see a lot of the before and after work, and just look at how natural the hairline is.
Yep.
And not only that, but the volume of content that the before and after that the surgeon produced, and that to give you an idea of how much experience he has. But consistency is important. Again, given no surgeon gonna be perfect, but if he provides so much consistency, if you subscribe to my channel every Friday, I upload a new video, then you know, hey, you know what? He's very consistent. He produced the result very good with good density and naturalness, and that help reinforce, you know, what from one surgeon to another. Yeah, and I'm glad you made this trip, and now you get to be on the other side and share your experience to the viewer. And thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye.